Hello all, this is Dr. Sage Breslin and this is Wisdom Wednesdays, video number 68. Last time we talked a little bit about what it would mean to shed your ultimate skin, to become completely and fully authentic. And I told you that during this video I would really embrace my final transformation into a fully authentic and transparent soul and self that you can understand and hopefully accept. I think many of you know me to be somebody whose brand is based on authenticity and transparency, and many of you know that I've worked in corporate leadership development and working with leaders and entrepreneurs of all kinds to develop that connection that allows us to be fully authentic. The connection first, of course, with ourselves, then with something greater than ourselves, and eventually connections between ourselves and others. And by doing so, by really creating that deep connection, we are able to be clearer within ourselves so that when we deliver a message, the message is clear. It means that our communication improves. It means our ability to be heard and understood by others improves exponentially. And in so doing, of course, it really ensures that others want to serve us, want to work for us. Our team members seem to be much more motivated and much more productive when our messages are clear, when we have a true connection, when they can feel that we are who we are. And that has been something I've been passionate about for about 20 years. As you also know, I am trained as a trauma psychologist, and so I do that work as well. And along the way, I developed a specialty that often ended up in the court system. And I don't talk a lot about that specialty. I guess for a long time I didn't need to. I talked with you all about kind of my corporate gig and the kinds of, messages and communications I wanted you to hear. And part of that was because it's easy. It's easy for me. I can share with you my cancer journey and how it does or does not affect my work in the corporate world, and I've shared a little bit about my backstory, but I certainly haven't shared it all. And maybe one of the reasons I haven't talked about my other specialty, which is working with women who have been in violent or unhealthy relationships, and not just women, I mean people, but specifically today I'm going to talk about my work with women. Maybe the reason that I could sit that on the shelf and really not speak so much about it is that it then didn't require me to share that same level of authenticity and in fact provide you with the kinds of samples and information about my life that would really sustain that authenticity. So recently I was working with Mellissa Seaman, who is a fantastic coach and also a trained lawyer, Harvard or Stanford trained lawyer. And we were talking really about the spiritual realm and how it impacts each of us. And you well know that I'm pretty spiritually driven. I can certainly be very pragmatic and analytic, but I am first and foremost connected to spirit or to God. Maybe even more to that than to myself at times. And as we spoke, it just became increasingly clear during our long conversation that it was time for me to come out of the shadows. And it was time for me to share a little bit of my journey that I have not shared quite so much. So what I'd like to start with is just to let you know that, we're all different. That's, that goes without saying, right? We're all different and we're all sort of connected different. We all embrace a different level of soul and with our sense of self. And it's impacted by how we come in, it's impacted by who we're raised by, our cultures, our churches, everything. And there's so many things that affect that. But some of us come in with a little extra slice. And those of us who are embodied that way, people often refer to us as old souls. I'm sure you've had the experience of interacting with someone and either you or somebody else says, oh, well, she's an old soul. She's wise because she's an old soul. Or a child who says something really remarkable and you just look at that child and you think, like, how is that even possible? You say to yourself, well, he's probably an old soul. So if we were to think about those folks who come in with that sort of special energy that just emanates from them, and we think about those old souls, so to speak, that are walking amongst us, we can really honor the fact that these old souls are like beacons. They're like lighthouses. And unfortunately, for me and for many women, we as beacons or lighthouses, we are beacons for those who are soul suckers. So for those of us who have this extra quality, this extra energy, this remarkable light source that kind of emanates from us, that's pretty attractive to those that aren't designed that way. It's naturally attractive to somebody who's sort of not designed that way and means no harm. And those are friendships that develop, and they're fun and they're exciting because there's a lot of curiosity about what this essence is, what this extra something is. In French they say, what is that? Je ne sais quoi. I don't know. What is that thing I can't quite name? Well, okay, that's all good. But when someone who isn't really looking at that old soul as just friendship material, they look at them as a source to feed on. Old souls become perhaps, fodder for the soul sucker. So for me, it began very early. I was born to parents who found me unusual. I later on figured out that I was not so much more unusual than they were. They just didn't let on to that until I was in my mid-30s. But they didn't really probably know what to do with me. They would have described me as an old soul. Now I can describe me as, clairvoyant at the time, which was kind of a hard rap to have as a little kid. But I got used to it over time, I suppose. But with that extra light emanating from me, I became a beacon for those who wanted to feed on me. And, by the time I was 5, the first perpetrator had found me, and that lasted until I was probably about 9. Second perpetrator assaulted me at 7, and it began to warp how I saw myself. It began to alter how I felt about this sort of extra connection that I had. By the time I was 15, even trying to shut that part of me down, place it in the vault, even then, I was a beacon of light. And I was spotted and groomed by a local cartel and eventually trafficked. And that nearly destroyed me. It would have destroyed me, honestly. I tried to kill myself, and after a very long conversation with God, I got sent back. And when I came back, I realized, number one, that I'd never be without God, no matter how I felt about what had happened to me or felt about myself. And that the connection was always going to be my foundation. And it was always going to help guide me through everything I did. And the few times where I felt really as if I were spinning, really didn't know where to turn or who to turn to, were times where I sort of lost that connection and I needed to brush off the tarnish and reinvest myself in that relationship with God. I eventually got away, and I ran towards a life for myself. And unfortunately, I needed safety. And I envisioned that, a strong man would be that safety. And, got to think about it. If I am a beacon of light, what am I going to be a beacon for? Unfortunately, more soul suckers. And, I found somebody who was charming and strong and funny and seemed to be the answer to my prayers. Quickly engaged, later married, and only in marriage did I fully understand how dangerous the situation was for me. I could feel my light leaving me. I could feel myself dying in the relationship. And at nearly the end of the relationship, I was trying to learn how to drive stick shift. I had learned before, but it had been years and years. I wanted to become adept again. And we owned a sports car, and so we were practicing driving, and there was just something feathering the clutch. That's what it was. Actually, that skill was hard for me, and he angrily demanded that I get out of the seat and switch seats with him, which I did. Good at being compliant. And, he revved the motor and got going faster and faster and faster. And at about 45 miles an hour, he popped the door open and pushed me out. And I'm so lucky that the voices of friends, funny voices, funny sentences came to mind. And one of my friends from graduate school, Marianne, used to say when we were camping, now remember, if you catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. And that's what I heard in my head. Stop, drop, and roll. And that's what I did. And I damaged my shoulder pretty well, but I rolled, and then I ran. And I ran, and I ran until I was out of that marriage and safe again. And for the next few years, I became myself again. I was able to kind of let that light come up and out of me. I wrote a book. I noticed that I could speak more freely, that my message was clear, that I was communicating clearly to people, that people could see me for who I was. And it felt glorious. And then, when I wasn't looking, I met another man. I'd been doing some self-work from time to time, but maybe I'd taken a break on that. And he was lovely. He was different, I thought, than the rest. And soon enough, we got engaged and we got married and we had a child. And before I knew it, a second child. And that's when it really became crystal clear to me that I was a single mother in a marriage. I started realizing again that feeling as if I were dying, that my light had to be placed so far down into the vault, because if I left it up, he would suck me dry. Everything was about him, even really just about him instead of the kids. And yet I felt really immobilized by motherhood. I didn't know if I could be a mother and take care of 2 children and do it all on my own. And I was so outside of myself that I couldn't envision that there'd be any other way to do it. And I found some sources of light in friends and colleagues who could see me even though I had put myself in hiding. And they helped me get out. And it took a while to recover. That's when I really started investing in trying to find out how I could be this, despite everything I'd been through, despite feeling like my chooser was broken. And right around that time that I was really starting to open up and totally embody my intuitive self, I met a man. You got the theme here? He was so charming. Everything felt so right. He seemed to really love all of my intuition, love what I stood for. He seemed to really support my being all that. Got married, had 3 kids, and then I got this sinking feeling. And I began to see that light flickering out inside me again. And I felt so ashamed. I felt like this was my fault. My fault that I'd met somebody who would gaslight me to no end, who seemed happier when I was more malleable, when I was small, when I was compliant. Well, who could feed off me much more easily when I didn't put up a fuss. And with 5 children, always needing something, I didn't have a lot of energy left. And then I got sick. And God has always spoken with solid 2x4 therapy to me, because apparently I don't listen otherwise. And this time the message was clear. Get out. Get out and start becoming yourself. Figure out what it is that you are not owning that keeps on getting in the way of your chooser. I don't have a broken chooser. I had a broken relationship with myself. And it makes sense if you look at how I was treated, how I was undervalued and devalued when I was young. And I thought I'd really gotten the gist of that, I felt really free of that. But what I didn't do was the reparation. I didn't really understand what that je ne sais quoi was. I didn't really know that this light inside me needed to be activated in order for me to be powerful and strong and communicate my message to others and to be the source to be reckoned with. So I'm inviting you, if you are in a soul-sucking relationship, or even better yet, if you've left that behind and you are, for all intents and purposes, doing great in your business, but still seem to be choosing the same guy, give me a call. There's more to be done. There's more to be done for you to value yourself, and maybe you too are an old soul. This is Dr. Sage Breslin, and this is Wisdom Wednesdays.